Good morning, and let me start by saying what an honor it is to be moderating the first plenary session of the Strategy, State, and IT Eurasia Forum. My name is Matthew Murray, and I am the founder and CEO of Sovereign Ventures Incorporated. This is a US-based company that engages in what we like to call techno-diplomacy, which is to work with public and private stakeholders to use and apply technology to solve public policy issues. And we specialize in working in this region in Eurasia, where I've been doing business or working in government for over 30 years now. And most recently in my government role, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Europe and Eurasia for the Obama administration. Our topic today is the IT industry in Eurasia, different paths, common challenges. And each of our esteemed panelists will address this theme from different perspectives, from government, from business, from different country and regional perspectives. Let me introduce them briefly. I'll starting at the other end. Farid Safarov, thank you for joining us on short notice. He's the Assistant to the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. And then Anna Charita, she's the Strategic Projects Director at the National Association of ICT Companies of Moldova. Rashad Azizov is the head, he's got the longest title, so just bear with me. He's the head of the Department of Innovative Development of Information Society and Electronic Governance of the Ministry of Transport, Communications, and High Technology of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And then Oleg Kondrashov is the CEO of Inkara company from Belarus. And then to my immediate left, Juan Navas Sabater, who's the lead ICT specialist and program leader at the World Bank. So let me set the stage for this panel. Our format is going to be that each of these esteemed speakers is going to talk about their personal experiences in this space for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And then we will go to a Q&A amongst the panelists. I'm gonna start by discussing a little bit of the StrategEast model. Many of you are familiar with it, but I'd like to take a minute and elaborate on it. StrategEast is a strategic do tank that has taken on the important challenge of trying to understand what are the common inherited problems in the post-Soviet space. What are the legacy issues that each of the post-Soviet countries faces that has created an obstacle to them becoming stable, market-oriented democracies? And their mission is to bring together political and economic leaders from the post-Soviet countries to collaborate across borders, find common challenges and opportunities, and to better align them to help the region engage in truly real and transformative change. This forum is tackling one of the biggest issues, which is the issue that Francis Fukuyama, the famous political economist, refers to as common to post-communist societies, which is they tend to engage in rent-seeking behavior rather than wealth creation behavior. And so this challenge is one that StrategEast is determined to address by introducing and strengthening and aligning elements of the entrepreneurial model of capitalism in this region, and specifically in the IT sector. And why in the IT sector? Because the IT sector is viewed as a way of accelerating the development of values that are essential to creating institutions that will guide market economies, that will build democracy, and that will strengthen the rule of law in the region. And so the initiative that StrategEast has started around this space is called the Global Minds Initiative. And the Global Minds Initiative is intended to bring together leaders from the public and private sector to accelerate a sharing of know-how and build platforms that can work across borders in different countries. Today, in this panel, we're going to be thinking about what are the conditions that are essential to create a strong IT economy. They may be legislative conditions, they may be the creation of specialized technoparks, they may be other initiatives that the government is taking. So we'll be hearing from government and we'll have a good sort of global perspective from the World Bank. And then, of course, we'll be hearing the private sector perspective. So I'm going to start with you, Farid, if you could, as the host country. And if you could give us 5 minutes on what the Ministry of Infrastructure is doing in this area of policy, we would greatly appreciate it.
Good morning to everyone. It is an honor that StrategEast houses a meeting in Ukraine, in Kyiv particularly. I'm sorry, and it is an honor for me to represent the Minister of Infrastructure, being the head of digital as well, and the ministry. So when we're talking about the infrastructure, most of us imagine the asphalt, runways, rails, airports or seaports, something like that. And one of the main tasks of me personally and of the minister is to make people use a word digital before the infrastructure. So from the one side, infrastructure is circulatory system of the economy. So it is the fundamental foundation for all macro and micro economic processes. And if you want to develop something, for example, if you want to improve the e-commerce inside of your country, you cannot do it without an effective processes in logistics. Because if you do not give the instruments for a buyer and seller to connect them physically, then you will even with the development of e-commerce, you will not develop, but not paying attention to the logistics, you will not develop it so good as you want. When the minister, actually the Ministry of Infrastructure is the first ministry that created the digital department inside of it during 2017-2018. So yes, we had e-gov agency, but nevertheless they are specifically doing their business and their stuff in e-gov, but nevertheless, among other ministries, we were the first ministry who decided to pay specific attention to the digital infrastructure, to digital processes. And now, with a new minister, I can say that we decided to improve that twice or 3 times even better. So we have 2 main objectives. The first one is to create a smart infrastructure. It is something difficult. It is something so-called heavy, because we want to create a multimodal network. And actually, we want Ukraine to become the logistic hub on the international transport routes. And on the other hand, the biggest priorities, the key priorities of the ministry are connected with the interaction of the state with the citizen and with business. And that's why we decided to focus on creation of specific e-cabinets that will allow a person to give less documents while attending for a license, for example, to shorten and to cut the amount of their physical visits to government buildings, and so on. We have a lot of different corruption risks that are connected, not only in Ukraine, that are connected with the live contact with the governmental officials. So actually we should understand that there is a risk when citizen or business has to interact with a live person, the corruption risks may occur. That's why we decided to make everything digital. The first 3 priorities that we are doing now are, first of all, is so improvement of the e-cabinet of the carrier, because the sphere of automotive transport is one of the most crucial for us. We have a lot of people that are doing business because they are doing their business in sphere of freight transportation. They go to Europe. They bring different stuff to Europe, and they need the licenses to enter different countries. And there were a lot of corruption risks in these spheres. That's why we decided to improve the e-cabinet of the carrier in order to create some instruments that will not allow for a person who is given a license to make some manipulations, and something that costs $2 should not cost 500 as it was until the recent times. The second issue is e-cabinet of sailor. So a person who is graduating from the university, he has to prepare a lot of documents in order to receive finally the passport, or first of all the diploma of a sailor, then the passport of the sailor. And in order to improve all those processes, because they are connected not only with the Minister of Infrastructure, they are connected with the Minister of Education, of the Healthcare, and other different government bodies, we decided to create a single so-called cabinet where a person who is graduating from the university receives his university diploma, enters the information into this cabinet, and since that moment until the day when he goes to pension, he can do all the interactions that are connected with the government and the need to receive some documents from the government or permissions. Everything will be held in this cabinet. I think that at the first quarter or the second quarter of the next year of 2020, we will finally announce this system and show how it is. Because I remember the case when the former minister asked, how many sailors do we have in our country? And the answer of a person who is responsible for this case was from 60 to 120,000. We do not know the direct amount of those people because no one created a register that can control the process. And that's why it was a highly corruptive issue. So, and the third quick win for us is the electronic platform of the registers. The Minister of Infrastructure holds at about 224 registers, and only 20% of them are in an electronic way. When I'm talking about electronic way, I mean an Excel. So not even a form of a platform that will allow to maintain all those registers. We understand that business actually needs this information. It is partially open data, and partially it is information that can be sold by the government, and they can earn money if they because they aggregate this information and make some analysis. So those are three main quick wins that we want to do in the nearest future. And additionally, there are some priorities that are connected with the experience of a person while using transport system. So some of you may know that in 2017 we launched electronic ticket at public transport, partially in 12 cities actually implemented the system, but now we want to go forward and we want to create a system of single electronic ticket when you are purchasing not a ticket for a specific mode of transport, but when you are buying a ticket for the whole route. So you choose a route, you use different kinds of filters in order to say that I do not want to use rail, or I want to use rail. I do not want to travel at night, or it's fine for me to travel at night. You put all those triggers, and then the system shows you different ways, different routes for you to achieve your final destination. And you buy with a one click, you buy a single ticket, and then it is so it is a deal and the obligation of the government to split those this money to all the stakeholders that are involved in the process of transportation of luggage or of the passenger. So as you remember, I said that we are also thinking about the smart infrastructure, and with Mr. Juan yesterday we actually discussed one of the major fundamental things for that is broadband. Actually, our main task is to create smart infrastructure on the roads, at rail, in the airports and seaports. We want to create a multimodal hub, logistic hub in Ukraine, and that's why we need the roads to be smart. We need the Internet of Things to be implemented on the roads. We want to control the processes that occur on the roads. We want to control and maintain the traffic on the roads, and actually to have statistics. Unfortunately, one of the biggest problems of Ukraine is that we do not have needed information in order to make some forecasts, in order to understand how to improve the infrastructure in Ukraine. We are now, at the moment, together with the EU delegation, we are implementing the national transport model, so a software that will allow us to see the bottlenecks and to create the strategy of the development of infrastructure. And in order to launch the system, we needed a lot of information, a lot of data that actually we should govern and we should have. But when I started collecting this data from the roads authorities, from rail authorities and others, I understood that we have only 30% of the data. So the rest of the data has never been collected. So the basic things, we do not have the basic things. In order to improve that, we need the platform, we need the solutions and the instruments that will allow us to collect this data, to analyze this data, and to use it in the proper manner. So those are three main priorities: interaction of the state with the citizens and business. Second one is the experience of business and of the passenger while using different modes of transport and the infrastructure as a whole. And the third one is smart infrastructure while using IoT in different spheres. So those are main three priorities that we are doing at the moment.
Excellent, thank you very much. And we'll return to this theme because it is indeed common to each of the countries in the region. It's about how you're turning government into a service provider using digitization as a mechanism for that. And it's something that we should discuss later in the panel in terms of how to share best practices. Our next speaker is going to be Anna Chirita, who I mentioned earlier is the executive director of the Moldovan Association of ICT Companies. Anna has been busy working on this as a leader in Moldova for 6 years now.
10.
7.
10.
Oh, 10, okay. And her interest is in creating conditions for competition in the ICT industry in Moldova and turning the information technology sector into a core enabler of the national economy. And she has a number of initiatives underway that she's going to share with us now. Thank you, Anna.
I also have a presentation, if I may ask the colleagues to put it on. And I'll stand up because I don't see what's on there. Let me just, I don't know if people see very well, but I'll try to cover. So, good morning, everybody. Let's see if it works. Okay. You have to hit. Okay, so I have to stay somewhere here. Okay, so as our moderator has mentioned, the last 10 years, and it's exactly 10 years this year, I have been spending the time all day and all night and all weekends probably trying to develop and to support the ICT industry development in Moldova. Some quick facts about the industry. I don't know how well you see in the back. Do you see it? Okay, so we have 99% 4G coverage in Moldova with a population of up to 3 million people officially. We have 23,000 people working in the ICT sector. We have approximately 1,200 people graduating from the IT faculties every year, and it's 2,000 with the vocational institutions and other type of institutions. But the most interesting fact is that 10 years ago, whenever we were talking about IT, and that's why I put the IT and not the C in there, it was close to zero in Moldova. It was existing, but the number was so small that it didn't even match anywhere in any kind of statistic data. I don't have the number here, but this year, the number of IT experts of Moldova, even if it's not too big, has exceeded the number of alcoholic beverages exports of Moldova. And everybody knows that Moldova is a country that exports wine. Is that right? Do you know that? Who drinks Moldovan wine? Everybody does. Okay, so this year in August, it exceeded. The last 2 years, the IT industry had double-fold every year of IT exports. It reached 145 million at the end of 2018, and it's overall with a turnover of 300 million US dollars. That's not so impressive probably with all the other numbers, but it's impressive how it actually grew. So it's times and times and times every year that actually made a change. What do we have and what do we do in terms of policies and legislation? 2013, I think, we had a national strategy, the Digital Moldova 2020. There were competitiveness strategies approved in 2013. There was a new one in 2018 last year. But the most interesting, important thing was that every time in ATIC, we were thinking that there are several pillars that need to be tackled in order for an industry to grow. First thing is the business environment. And we have a law on IT parks. Belarus has technoparks. We have a law on virtual IT parks. Basically, we don't have physical infrastructure. We just have a law that says that every IT company that is operating in Moldova benefits of a 7% single tax on the turnover of the company. This is a very interesting thing because there are over 500 companies, members of the Moldova IT Park. Sorry, I push here. So over 500 companies in 1 year. When we were doing the benchmark in 2017 with 15 companies in ATIC, we were thinking that in the first year we would have somewhere 80 companies joining the regime. We have over 500, and there are, and 25% of the companies are actually new operational companies. Another 25 is foreign capital companies. So basically, this is an impact on the IT industry. So we have the good business environment, or we're working on that. There was a next thing. We need good people. Everybody needs good people. We need good people to be able to provide the right workforce for the IT industry to develop. And we don't need just coders or basic things. We started looking at different niches because we understand we can't compete with huge companies. We can't even compete with Ukraine, so we have to be different. Probably about 6 years ago, we envisioned such a project, which is probably at the current moment one of the biggest PPPs, public-private partnerships in Moldova, which is called TechWell. At that time, it was called ICT Excellence Center Development for the whatever. And we call it that it's the place and the project where people, community ideas, research, investment, and everything that relates to IT actually meet. We were thinking that we want to provide world-class education, and we do. And we were thinking that we want to connect businesses with students, professional investors, and we actually started doing that. We were thinking that we want to do research and development, and this is the next phase, just because you have to go through different stages in order to develop the industry. So we have a bunch of partners who believed in it. The first ones were actually the US government, the USAID, and the government of Sweden. They have provided the first cash-in money, the first 4 million. It started with 200,000, actually. It was really funny 6 years ago. It grew every half a year from 500, 1 million, 2 million, 4 million. Now it's 8.9 million coming from the donor money. It's the multinationals, Microsoft, IBM, we have Oracle and Cisco and others on board. And it's the local companies, including the, as you see, we have 3 main operators. I don't know if anybody knows, but 3 main operators who are competitors on the market, but at the same time, they're all present and supporting this, this initiative. We have IT companies and we have a bunch of non-IT companies providing that. In 2017, we opened TechWell. It's a 5.4 thousand square meter space, but we say it's not really about the space, it's actually about what it provides. And what it provides is we have had over 43,000 beneficiaries in 4 years, but the last 2.5 years were actually very crucial. We started delivering education to professionals, then we went down, we started delivering education to children. We have children who are coming and studying IT and IT technologies, saying robotics or design or programming from the age of 5. We have professionals who study or get better education, but we also have a lot of non-professionals who are there. For example, last year we held our 10th anniversary ICT career orientation, which is an event to promote the IT industry. We had a record number of almost 1,500 people attending. The center was falling apart in the direct way. Why I'm saying that this is a PPP, we have money attracted from private sector and from the government. The next phase is to actually match the 8.9 million and do regional centers. And we also track how much the startups that we are supporting are actually investing. And now they reached the 10 million. So basically we can say that every dollar we invested or the project has invested in supporting startups has actually had an impact. We tailor our programs because we think to any specific target. So it's university students, university professors, companies, startups, women and girls, private sector, public sector. Everybody has actually a specific program within TechWell. We run about 300 programs overall, different programs. The next phase, as I mentioned, is actually to cover Moldova. Probably we have been somewhat successful, and we are considering and seeing different polls in Moldova on how to actually deploy the same or adapt a specific model to that. It's planned for the next 3 years. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of educational and startup programs. The target for the next years is actually 70,000 people per year, which means that it's actually a third of the educationally involved population of Moldova per year. So it's actually targeting almost every single person. We are thinking of going in every school, and we do that already. We are thinking going to the rayons, the so-called outside Chisinau. And of course, we are thinking on developing different markets because we understand we cannot be alone. There are a bunch of activities that we do. And on one thing, it's really important that there is the government support, and it is. We have been lucky to work with different type of governments all over the last 10 years. Somewhat everybody said that IT is important, but it's also important to have the flagship of the private sector, because the private sector is much more dynamic and actually has a say and can change things. And it's really important to have really open-minded academia. Now we have a rector that everybody else hates in Moldova just because he was absolutely active and open about 5 years ago. So to answer the question that you have asked, Matthew, is that in order to succeed, and we're still on half of the way probably, it takes much more than one stakeholder to be involved. It actually takes every stakeholder to be part of and support the same initiative or the same ideas. It's really important when these people share, and I must say that the IT sector in Moldova has been really constructive in the last 10 years at least, and they have always come with really interesting things to support both the government and backwards. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you,
here are some of my contacts. Thank you.
So, you know, I want to pause and just applaud the fact that Anna came here with the news that the ICT industry has exceeded the wine industry in exports in Moldova. That's actually quite an accomplishment. The Moldovan wine industry is actually growing, and it's diversifying around the world, and it's doing very well. And so it's very impressive, really, indeed. So congratulations. Rashad.
Thank you very much, dear attenders, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, it's a honor for me to be here with you. and to discuss such an interesting and important themes like their IT trend challenge, infrastructure, development of infrastructure in our countries. You know, everything is changing. Even the long name of my department changed while I was here. Yeah, if in the past it was the innovation development of informational society and electronic governance, now it's innovation and digital transformation department. That means that digitalization is one of the most popular terms that are used in the 21st century. And of course, they are in the forefront of many strategies, the strategies of the countries, the strategies of their small and big enterprises. But the main challenge is that the word not to stay like a word. It must be a real change. I prepared a long presentation, but I want to economize our time. And because many of things that I want to tell is very similar to what is happening in Ukraine, in Moldova, in other countries. Of course, the big countries of PSNR region are a little bit further go in its development. The small ones need to find their own road. But of course, in many countries, there are infrastructure projects. And there are high-tech parks, virtual or real. There are a lot of programs that are, most of them are supported by the state. And the main challenge for our countries is to bring private sector more closer to this process, to make PPP projects, especially the innovations sector, in their IT sector, because having their post-Soviet history, sometimes our traditions counts that everything starts in the state. But now their main task of their state is to make their situation more good for private sector to come, to bring investment, and to make money to bring new innovations. In our country, we have this situation now. We are trying to bring more private money to their high-tech parks, because most of them are considered to be the state bodies. But innovations coming from the private sector, from their startups, etc. The second challenge is, as it was mentioned in my colleague Anna before, we need the synergy between all the state bodies. Because, as I mentioned, the words are popular, but there are a lot of talks and not so much real deeds, or there are a lot of statistics. But sometimes these statistics are not the real. Especially, for example, when we are speaking about the startups, we are considering how much startups there are in our high-tech parks, business incubations, but for real development, we need the startups that have the economical growth, that have income, etc. And in our country, sometimes there are different tasks that are put into their strategy roadmaps are moving from one ministry to another. And when we have such a change, there are the risk that we can lose time. That's why the main issue is the speed of transformation. It must go in time. We have no time to analyze how to change their state body who is responsible. For example, last year, their e-governance that were brought down by the Ministry of ICT moved to another state body. We have the organization that is called ASAN. It's big state entity that is responsible now for electronic services. Why we had this? It was absolutely right decision, because now our country is trying to move from the e-governance to the digital governance. But digitalization means absolutely synergy between other state bodies. That's why this year we started the project of G-Cloud, and it is done by the Ministry of ICT, of High Tech and Communication. And that's why the situation is that there, for development of different services, IT systems is responsible one state body, and from the other side, all this physically will be situated in their infrastructure of another one. That's why the synergy between these bodies is the crucial issue now, not to lose the time, not to lose their money, to reduce costs, etc. There was a risk of, because the innovations means bringing the new generation, the educative projects, as I've mentioned, the incubation and other acceleration programs. There is the risk that every state body is building its own small ecosystem that is bringing the new young people for there. But if we want to have the real success in this field, in the field of bringing the new IT trends, their new innovations to the whole country, we need to have absolutely strong synergy between different state bodies, because even if there are some bodies that are responsible especially for this development, there are other ones who need to have their special department responsible for digitalization to make all the state bodies close to each other, to have their common rules, common standards of negotiating to the private sector, the common rules of PPP, because the project that means digitalization are not only for one ministry, not only for one sector. Now there are they are common for all the sectors of our economy. Medium. Thanks.
Rashad, thank you very much. We're gonna come back to this again, common theme and common challenge among governments in the region, which is how to use the tools of e-governance and digitization to promote entrepreneurship. Our next speaker is Oleg Kondrashov. He comes down from Minsk, from Belarus. He's a recent winner of Entrepreneur of the Year for the city of Minsk, and he has created a truly unique model for doing business not only in this region but globally, and he has done this based on the conditions that are uniquely provided in the country of Belarus for the IT industry. So Oleg, welcome.
Thank you. I need to stay while the show. Well, my name is Oleg Kondrashov. I am a CEO of Encata. I'm roughly explain what we are doing. We take the scientist who almost finished his development, and with our companies, we catalyze him to mass production. That's why we are like a bridge between the science and the life. We are exactly on the border of IT and the real life, and that's why we, help to do that. I will show you how it's work. Well, we have 200 engineers in 7 countries. We have affiliates. Our head office are in Minsk in Belarus, and I'm an engineer. I'm a physicist. That's why I, created all the business based on the technical knowledge. And do you know that 98% of the startup died in 6 months, and we try to solve this problem, and we understand why. And we build up the system. We compare the development process of the startup with education system. Like an education system, you have a kindergarten, you have a school, you have a university. And in different level, you have different approach how to develop the startups, how to develop the people. You can't take the student, the teacher from the university, put them into the kindergarten. He will not success. We try to think about it, and we create the flow of the companies and the ecosystem that there is a technical readiness level. It's NASA methodology of developing this, the technologies. And in different levels, we created a different company which is working with a startup on different levels of that. And I will show you how it's work. The first level, it's a kindergarten. It's Make It Center. It's franchise model. This is a place where the startup can come and passing through the education process, he can produce his first mock-up to prove that idea it's really work. It's called proof of concept prototype. And I will show you how it's work. You pass through the testing, and if you're approved, you can get in. There are all necessary machines inside and special software to how to control it, education system. Each machine will switch on only if you will pass through the testing, safety control, and we charge per minute. And we gave the grants to the startups to use it if the idea is really cool and we see that they have a potential. And this is tracking system. If the machine are in bad condition, it means that we will reduce the rate of previous guy and the price of the machine will increase for them personally. This is a shop where you can buy different kind of materials, electronic parts and so on, because it's accelerate development. To control everything, we set up the AI system, and the AI system recognize who take the tools and what kind of tools he take, and if he will not put it back, we charge the money from him from this card. It means that only one guy can operate all that stuff by himself, and it will reduce the cost of all that process. Because do you know that in this stage, to use the working force of the professional engineers is very expensive. You need to check that ideas work or not. That's why this is a kindergarten of technologies. This is a real case. The guy come to us, they come up with such kind of bike like that, and now we start the mass manufacturing of them. Well, it's a kindergarten. Now I'll show you the next one. It's a school. The school, this is a R&D center where there are professional engineers sitting there and professional machines. And when the mock-up is ready, with the professional engineers, we develop it and to make it as a pre-manufactured prototype. It's look like a manufacturing one, and you need to have a lot of calculation, education, and so on just to do it. And the science by themselves can do it because it's a different approach. And I show you how it's work. About this technology, I will explain a little bit later. We take the old military technology to build up the building because a lot of technoparks, they suffered of that a long period of time of building the buildings, and they forgot that they need to develop the startups. This building is producing in 2 months, and it's cost approximately $250 per square meter, and everything is inside, and you can develop the technoparks in half a year approximately. It's a professional machines inside, and we have almost all technologies that people have that to produce a prototype, but we use it only in 5% of their capacity to produce we come up something, we need to see that we make mistake, and after that produce another one. That's why the serial machines is using only to produce the first prototypes. Manufacturing area, and the engineers, before beginning design in our R&D center, they're working as a worker for 6 months, and only after that they begin to design something because they need to understand how it's produced, how the manufacturing is working, and not to produce air castles. It's called undone button. If the worker has some problem in producing the prototype, he pushes the button, and the designer know that his idea is producing right now. He come, they solve some problem together, and after that they continue, producing and designing. Well, it was a school. Well, and now this is that technology that we developed to fast build technoparks, co-working spaces, offices, and so on. And I will show you how it's work. Well, I explained to you that one of the biggest problem to develop the ecosystem is to renovate the old buildings, to build a new one, and the people who do that, they begin to forget their main goal, because their main goal is to develop the startups. But after some time, they think that, okay, well, I'm a developer, I need to build and so on. And this is a problem everywhere. And to solve this problem, we create such kind of building. We put our own R&D center there to check how it's work. And now we begin to build manufacturing, offices, and so on in such kind of building. And it's one of the main, it's not a problem. It's a surprise for us. It's not a building. You shouldn't pass through any controls, through any registration system, and so on. You can put it inside the, just in the, in the city, in the center of the city, and in 2 or 3 months. Well, and based on that, we come up the concept of the Technopark, where in the middle it's Make It Center, offices and co-working space on the right side, and the manufacturing on the left side. We have the R&D center there, and sharing center with the machines where the manufacturing can share it to produce their own, production, prototypes, and so on. Well, thank you for attention, and me, for the engineers, I can declare that for me it's a pity that now the hardware, it's only the way to sell the software. That's why, for sure we have a big software development, but, well, the trend to develop the IT, it should be not only to develop the IT, because the IT should use somewhere where we are living in the real life. That's why I think that the future will be on the border of the knowledge and technologies. Thank you.
Oleg, excellent. And we're going to return to the question of what the conditions were in which you were able to develop such an innovative and impressive company. We're now going to hear from Juan, is the ICT specialist at the World Bank in Brussels, and he's going to address some of the broader global trends that we're talking about today.
Thank you very much. I am going to speak from the chair so that I can see most of you. I have a few slides, so I hope the technology works, and I'll follow them from my smartphone. So what I want to talk about is, first of all, why does the World Bank get involved in the issue of IT industry, and the issue of developing the digital economy in countries, and we look at it from our obligation to support economic development. So I'll talk a little bit about the economic impact first. Then I'll zoom into the question that was posed today on the challenges for IT sector in the Eurasian region. And finally, I'll give a couple of examples of how we are dealing with this specific issue within the Eurasian region in particular. Down? There we are. Okay. So, first of all, we've done a lot of global analytics on the impact of the digital economy on growth, employment, on trade and innovation, and we realized that there are many externalities that come from developing the ICT infrastructure and from developing the IT industry. So for instance, one of our studies shows that a 10% increase in broadband penetration gives at least between 1 and 1.5% increase in GDP growth. So that is a significant result. There's also impact from internet penetration to export growth. There's also correlation to jobs created. There are correlations between ICT jobs created and jobs in the overall economy through the multiplier effect. So we look at all these results, and we realize that investing in a digital economy supports our objective of developing economic and social development. Now, we are in the process of conducting a number of such studies specifically for a number of countries, including Ukraine. And we've looked at the impact, for instance, of broadband adoption on GDP growth. And not only adoption, because we realize that also speed is important. So the impact of broadband speed is almost as important as adoption of ICT, of broadband. So some of the preliminary results show us that if the current trend stays the way it is in Ukraine, the GDP growth may GDP growth attributable to broadband may be just 0.6%. But if there's an accelerated adoption and an accelerated growth of speed, it can reach up to 1.5% impact. So it is a significant increase. The same applies to jobs. So if there's an increased growth in jobs, and if Ukraine is able to reach the level of, say, some of the neighbors, Western Europe, or the most advanced ICT adopters, where ICT jobs are about 3% of the employment in the countries, then there can be another more than 600,000 jobs created in the economy. That is a huge impact. We conducted similar studies for the Eurasian Economic Union, and we show results also of working together as a bloc. So there are multiplier effects of countries working jointly. We're doing similar work in Central Asia, and we realize that the impact of digitalization individually is much smaller than the impact of working in cross-border, working through harmonized policies across multiple countries. Now, with regards to the situation with the IT industry, we conducted a study recently for Belarus, but we compared multiple countries. And we realized that most of the countries in the region face indeed similar challenges. The need to continue to grow IT exports. We heard a lot that exports have grown, but still there are challenges in continuing to grow those exports. Challenges in continuing to grow the share of IT professionals in the overall employment. There's still also a result that we have just begun to realize is that as the IT sector develops, there's an inflation in salaries. And in some countries, this has reached could become a problem. For instance, in Belarus, according to our data, IT professionals now earn more than in Poland. So this the growth in IT employment could reach a point where it needs to diversify to continue to grow. And the same applies to access to finance. So access to VC finance is seen as a problem across most of the countries. There are also issues related to IT skills. We conducted a survey, and some of the firms surveyed say the main problem was lack of qualified candidates. We also see a trend that there are a number of STEM graduates is insufficient compared to Finland or Poland. So there are issues related to quality of IT skills. Now, so what does the World Bank do when it comes to supporting digital economy programs? We realize that it has an impact on overall economic development. So we conducted a major piece of research. We published our World Development Report 3 years ago, 2016, which is called Digital Dividends. And it gave us a framework for addressing digitalization as part of the broader economic development programs of our client countries. And we structure our support into 3 broad areas. One is we look at the end results. What are the so-called digital dividends that we want to achieve in terms of economic growth, employment, improved services? And based on those objectives, we identify the key components of the digital economy program that we want to support. Our focus is on the bottom part of this diagram, which is what we call the foundations. So the foundations include not just the infrastructure, it includes also support to the IT industry. We have included this as a separate layer as well, but it includes the so-called analog foundations. So all the legal and regulatory framework, the institutional framework. Without it, the digital economy cannot thrive. And then in the middle layer are all the applications, all the software solutions and the services that can be developed once you have all those foundations. And the foundations include also, of course, the cloud infrastructure, the IT parks, etc. So all of that is what we call the foundations. Now, a couple of examples. One is a project that we're doing with support of the European Union. It is called EU for Digital, and it is to support broadband development in the Eastern Partnership countries. So we're looking at common problems across the 6 Eastern Partnership countries, which in particular relate to issues of broadband speeds, issues of competitiveness or competition, issues of domestic backbone development, and many others. This is just a very quick summary. Now, what we're supporting these countries, or the 6 Eastern Partnership countries, is to, based on these bottlenecks, based on their economic development objectives, we design a national broadband strategy, or help them design a national broadband strategy that includes policy and regulatory measures, so transformation, reforms in the institutional, legal, and regulatory framework, and accompanied with financial measures, so support to broadband development in rural areas, support to PPPs to develop the backbone, etc., etc. And the final example I want to show is in Central Asia. We're developing a massive regional program for all the countries of Central Asia, which includes 4 major components. One is to support the regional digital connectivity infrastructure, both at the national level as well as at the cross-border level. The second is the data centers and digital platforms and so-called smart solutions, which are also in some cases regional. The third one is the enabling environment for the digital economy, so it includes supporting reforms and harmonized policies and regulations. And the fourth one is very relevant to the topic of today's conference, is developing the digital innovation and skills. So there we support digital entrepreneurship, skills and capital development, as well as innovation and centers of excellence. And finally, digital literacy. So I stop here and I'm open to questions and discussion. Thank you.
Juan, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a lot of raw material to work with, and we're going to move quickly now to try to integrate some of it. And we're going to do this in a way that's designed to meet the challenge that Anatoly Motkin laid down for this conference yesterday, which is what can we do in the next year to leverage the successes of both the public and private leaders on this panel, and also address the common challenges and look very objectively at some of the common failures. I'm going to start by asking our private sector participants, Oleg and Anna, could you tell us what has worked from your perspective that the governments of your respective countries, of Belarus and Moldova, have done to create the enabling environment for entrepreneurial growth in the IT sector? What has worked, and what do governments need to do more of? Anna, why don't we start with you? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Matthew. Some of the things that have worked have actually been also part of the presentation. It definitely, everything starts with a vision. You need to know where you want to head to, and it's really important that the government and the private sector head the same way. When they head different directions, nothing happens. What has worked in Moldova was enabling the better business environment. So basically from 2005, we have had fiscal incentives for the IT sector. All the other sectors complained about why would the IT sector have any additional fiscal incentives versus the other industries. And we were always, I'm sorry, Belarus and the Ukraine and everybody, we're always bringing the examples that if we don't have anything, it's actually we are not competitive on the regional market. So basically it's, although we are all friends, we still compete for the same piece of the pie probably on the global level. In 2015, we have had, or 16, we have had these lone IT parks which entered into agreement in the 17-18, and we have had created the park in 18. So it's a different regime, much better than the other one with its pluses and minuses, but with a predictability for the next 5 to 10 years when it was approved. So this was good. It was the first thing to acknowledge that we need a better business environment. The second thing was, as I mentioned, the human capital. An industry cannot function without people, without well-trained people. And we have sat together with the government at that time the vision of having impact on the IT sector via specific different methods. We saw that the universities could not deliver sufficient labor force and well-prepared labor force, not because they didn't want to, but because everybody who came to the universities was not well-prepared as well. So we have had systemic approaches as well. For example, last year, together with the government, we introduced digital education in every first grade in Moldova, every first grade. All the first grade teachers were enabled with tablets and specific equipment to be able to provide this digital education, so from the first grade. On the other side, ATIC is the implementer of a national robotics program. So basically from the 5th grade, we have robotics implemented in 130 schools, mandatory and the rest non-mandatory. We have had input on everything that comes with the 9th grade, vocational education, and so on and so forth. What we are working now, and is still missing, is the access to finance. For example, you work on the people, you work on the environment, but then in order to develop, the risk is so high for the startups that you need to create premises. Together with our team, we're working on a Startup Moldova program, which would enable startups to actually get better entrepreneurial education, better business services, and finance, which would decrease their risks because there are no banks, no financial institutions providing correct financing mechanisms in Moldova for the tech startups. I'm not talking about any other startups who have collaterals and equipment that they can put as a guarantee. IT companies can't. So we're actually in the process of doing that. And the next one would be markets, because you can't think of just the local market. It's too small. You have to be agile enough to be able to be present in different markets and to be able to actually be there. And there is a joint role. private companies can do things, but that's the case of the big countries. And even in big countries, the government sometimes promotes the industry. So it's really important that there are correct activities or initiatives in all these components so that actually the market grows.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. And you also noted in your presentation that you have a 7% revenue tax on ICT companies. So it's not a profit tax, it's a revenue tax, and that simplifies the environment for operation. And so in Belarus, it's a 1% revenue tax, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Well, what I can explain about our government, what they done. Well, if you take the smart people and you put them into one place and don't touch them for 10 years, I think that they will solve all the problem by themselves. This is exactly what our country's done, and they, more than 10 years ago, they create a high-tech park. They give, okay, you will pay 1% revenue and the low tax from salary. And now we have a good ecosystem for the IT company, not for the IT startups. 1 year ago, our government began to change the idea that, okay, we need to support not only the companies, we need to support the startups. I think that maybe after 5 or 6 years, I can declare that, okay, we have a good ecosystem for the startups. Well, do you know that when you grow the plants, and when you will take off the plants from the soil and see every day how the roots is growing, you will not grow the plant. And this is the same one, okay, put them alone, give them the taxes, and don't touch them. And I think that everything will be good. Thank you.
So, Fareed, Rashad, I'm going to ask you to address these points directly and sort of pull yourself back from what you're doing every day as government officials and tell us how you're thinking about the fundamental question of how government can interfere less with entrepreneurs so that they're not pulling the plant out of the soil to see if it's growing, but are instead creating all the nurturing conditions for entrepreneurs to grow with the benefit of, sure, good public policies, but also a mentality on the part of government which recognizes that wealth creation by individuals who are in the IT sector has a value for the broader society and has a value for introducing essentially stronger institutions over time, including your own government agencies.
You know, in our country, the state started to interfere to the IT sector, like building the ecosystem and something like that. From their 2012, opened the high-tech park and ICT for fund, and that making their giving grants and etc. etc. But I absolutely agree with Oleg. State was waiting for some results because it must be shown to the statistic. Because this statistic must be done because of some strategic roadmaps and others. We must firstly understand, analyze what we want to gain. Mm-hmm. We want to gain numbers or we want to gain ecosystem. For our country now, we are diversing their attitude. Also, as I mentioned in my report, that we need their common understanding. What is the ecosystem? What is IT company? What is IT startup? What is the grant or investment? Something like that. From the other side, different state bodies have different attitudes. That's why when in the country, in their government, state bodies are competing with each other, that's why it differs their attitude. But the private sector needs common attitude from the state. I suppose that at the moment, the very thing to do for Azerbaijan, absolutely we are doing it, is to make ecosystem players to understand, to feel that they are dealing with one player. State is one player. Mm-hmm. After that, their interfering will be much less. Why? Because different state bodies coming and making their rules. They have own understanding how to develop this. For example, in our country, last year we had their innovative reform. We started to preparing innovation strategy, having some roadmaps. In these different roadmaps, strategic roadmaps, there are concrete projects that will be mentioned in the new innovation strategy. Why we are doing this? Because we want to unify all the processes. Yeah, and from the other side, we had established the new innovation agency. We had a lot. Just our minister had two bodies before. We merged them, and now it is one body. From the other side, the Agency for Development of SMEs was established under the Minister of Economy, and they have also their own attitude. And now we are trying to build the synergy, because if we go in different ways, the ecosystem will suffer from it. For me, it's the answer.
No, it's very interesting, and I think you've sort of surfaced two very important ideas. One is that ICT companies need to be able to fail. They need to be in an environment where they can fail fast, fail slow, whatever it takes to learn what risk is and how to create something better. But you've also hit upon the key theme that businesses need predictability, reliability from government, and they crave stability in that sense. And so this initiative that you're taking to unify the government streams and public streams that deal with innovation makes a great deal of sense. It may also mean that your title will get even shorter in the coming years. So Farid, please.
Yeah, I think that we suffer almost the same things in Ukraine as well as Azerbaijan suffers. So the main issue is for the government, I guess their main obligation of the government is to define who is the main stakeholder on the side of the government responsible for all these processes, for innovative processes and for the development of entrepreneurs as well. So we have, for example, Minister of Economy, who have a specific department responsible for innovations. But we have the same thing as well in the Ministry of Education. And when we are talking about, for example, projects like Horizon to 2020, who can actually give some funds for entrepreneurs, for startups to develop their ideas, we say that the Ministry of Education is responsible for that. But when we are talking about the innovations in production, so it is the sphere of the competence of the Ministry of Economy. We have this mass in different spheres. For example, the same stuff was with digital direction. Now we have the specific ministry for digital transformation who are responsible for the whole governmental strategy, and specific ministries should have so the idea to have CBDOs or CDOs, chief digital officers, who will be responsible for the development of digital issues inside of the sphere of the competence of the ministry. I can give a good example. So my directorate is responsible as well for the development of electric vehicles, and I can give a showcase that shows that sometimes business can do better, like Alec told us. So if you do not touch smart people, they will create something great. So the same stuff was with charging stations for electric vehicles and for the whole sector of EVs. So no one on the side of the government decided to touch them. So they were developing themselves as they see the market, business. They were growing, not roughly, but nevertheless they were growing until the moment when we understood that annually we have 100% more charging stations and EVs bought and imported into the country. And we decided to create the regulation. And when we decided to create the regulation, we had a lot of working sessions, working groups, conferences. When the government was talking to the users, the drivers, and to business who were developing the chains of EV stations and who were importing those cars. And the main conclusion of all these working groups was do not put your nose into this private sector, because we can develop it better. The only things that you can do is to create, for example, some customs or tax specific conditions when it will be much more attractive to buy EV rather than with fuel engine car. And the second issue was that business that is dealing with some specific issues on the daily basis, they see the problems much more better than me or my colleagues inside of the building where we're sitting. So the main idea is that government should interfere into business, because we have to create regulations. So say the same thing to the bankers. They will say, okay, we don't need the central bank who will control us. Say the same thing to postal operators and to security or intelligence officers who are controlling what is coming inside the country and what is leaving the country. So you cannot say that the government should not interfere. The government should create the regulation, and that regulation should be liberalized. So the business should understand that the main task of the government is not to take additional taxes from business, and if yes, so the government should give something beneficiary for the business. So that is the main idea, and I think that the current cabinet of ministers and the current political power of Ukraine is looking at this sphere.
Great. Fareed, thank you. You've surfaced three very important points regarding how government culture is changing in this part of the world in the following ways. First, it's shifting from being a rent seeker to being a service provider. And that's why these digital tools are becoming so important to your role and to what your mission is. The second is that you are trying to shift away from interference. And the third is you're trying to shift towards smart regulations based on an assessment of the impact of those regulations on business. So these are all important best practices in both Azerbaijan and Ukraine. And now we're going to turn to the World Bank, because you made a very interesting comment early in your presentation, which was that you're seeing multiplier effects from how the adoption of policies, enabling policies in a regional context are making a larger impact. So could you give us some examples of that? And could you also address the issue that both government officials raise, which is how they can do better at having a unified, more streamlined approach to governance in this region?
So let me tackle the second question first, and then I'll come back to the regional effects. From the World Bank perspective, we also agree that the best thing that governments can do in promoting the IT industry is actually to let it develop itself. But as Farid also mentioned, it cannot be just a free-for-all. So the enabling environment needs to be created, and that is the main role of the government, to establish an enabling environment that can support IT industry growth, that can support the absorption of IT specialists. So it is about it's about education policies, as well as it is about tax and customs policies. It can also establish some innovative enabling environment, like in some countries they're using regulatory sandboxes to experiment with new technologies, with experimental solutions that are not yet, it's not yet clear what the impact will be on the broader economy. The regulatory framework should be, in any case, open to competition. So it should be liberalized in such a way that it enables, that it promotes more private investment. But I also see the role of the government to be a smart user of the technology, to be to demand from the private sector specific solutions and services. So if the government, as a big buyer of technology, is open to the local IT industry, it will help create that environment and that ecosystem, right? There's also a role, and we've done this in many countries, in supporting the local economic development. So in many countries, we are supporting the IT industry, not so much in the capital city, because very often the capital city is where it is already very well developed, but actually going to secondary cities and helping create the training centers, the capabilities for local youth, local entrepreneurs also to get established and develop a network of IT centers. And this brings me to the point about the regional synergies. We are working in many regions in Latin America, in Africa, in Central Asia, I mentioned, the Pacific Islands, through regional approaches. Because we realize that, first of all, in the build-out of infrastructure, you need to have high-speed connectivity in order to be able to sell your services, especially if you're oriented to export, right? So without good high-speed connectivity, the IT industry cannot really flourish. This can be done much better through regional approaches than on an individual basis. So, for instance, in the Caribbean, several islands have joined together to build submarine cables with financing from the World Bank, so that they can all together create their local IT industries and sell their services to the US or to Europe or to other countries, right? So that multiplier effect from working together is very clearly seen at the infrastructure level. It is also seen at the institutional level, because we help these regional groups of countries to establish their own research and education networks, so that they exchange knowledge and exchange researchers and actually participate in joint research programs that are applied to solutions and to developing solutions for the IT industry. And it is not only on the research side, but it's also on the entrepreneurship side, where we support coalitions of IT parks that can collaborate and develop their joint solutions. So it is difficult to actually measure that multiplier effect, but we're seeing that the countries that collaborate, that work in that collaborative environment, are more successful in exporting their products.
Thank you. So let's talk about a coalition of IT parks as an idea for a moment, because all the speakers, whether from a public or private perspective, have addressed the larger question and challenge of workforce development, which is to say, not only training and educating the human capital that's strong in each of these countries, but also retaining it inside the borders. So it seems to me that part of the solution to that is having more venture capital, having a better and stronger and more locally sort of based venture capital industry. And also, by virtue of having a venture capital industry, creating a better and stronger pipeline of startups. So is that something that could be done through a coalition of IT parks and techno parks in this part of the world? Let's start with our private sector panelists. Does that sound like a good idea?
It's interesting that you asked the question to the private sector. First of all, we need to look at the fact, what is the status of the IT parks in all the countries. I assume they're still government-driven or administrated institutions. Is it true in your case, Oleg? It's a government-driven institution, the technopark or the IT park?
No.
It's not. It's fully private?
Yeah.
Okay. In our case, it's actually government. government-driven.
It's mean that the high-tech park, it's a government organization, but the facilities that are inside, it's private. Because
Yes,
the
well,
technopark
still.
give only the rules and give
Okay,
the laws.
so you have a physical infrastructure, we have a virtual one. Indeed, in order, I'm not sure whether it's only the IT parks that need to collaborate. Probably there has to be some more extensive thing, as in fact, it differs in every single country here. And in order for something to succeed in relation to human capital and the questions that you put up front, you do have to have some understanding and some good cooperation on the government level and on the private sector level. How that interferes in between, that's a different question. So I would not put that specifically it should be just the IT parks, just because the nature of it somehow differs from country to country. There definitely should be some pipeline and some roundtable or whatever in order to foster the startups and everything and have a collaboration model. As I mentioned, probably all the countries still compete somehow among themselves, so it's better to find a way to compete something for together rather than compete among themselves. And I'm not sure there is one specific recipe and whether the IT parks is the exact recipe. I think it's somewhere much more beyond, so thank you.
Well, and thank you for differentiating between what is good competition and what can be destructive competition in this area. Oleg, I know that your business model is designed to attract startup companies. So what are your thoughts about the policy aspects of that in this region and what initiatives could be taken?
Well, everybody know that in our region everything is changing every 3 years. And try to imagine that you are an international venture fund and how you can invest money there. Because after 3 years the law will change and well, you'll lose your money. And there is a saying that in the first stage only friends, father and fools can invest money. Well, we have no rich friends in our region. We have no fools. And I hope. Well, we have only father. The government should be a father. They should invest the money in the first stages of the startups because nobody can do that in this region. And when after they grow and not touch to 10 years, and after that the international and foreign investor will invest the private money there. And in the last case that our startups need to have the chance to make a mistake because all our laws is based on the Soviet Union law and we have any chance to make a mistake. And in this case, my advice to the governments is not to touch the startup, to make the good ecosystem, to give the grant money in the first stages and to give that money that they are not understand. It's not mean that the government say, okay, I will take you $10,000 and after 2 years I will see what will be the result. But you need $200,000 and you will split this money to 10,000 startups, you will have zero. This is one of my advice to do that in this country.
Great. So let me turn to the government representatives here with the question that Oleg has posed, which is, are you already, and do you think you could do more public sector investment in startups that is enlightened investment and doesn't have conditions attached to it and is truly geared towards sort of a risk-based model? And that's the first part of this question. The second part is what Juan raised, which is, what are you doing to send public signals through your procurement processes to encourage local investors? Well, for example, local developers of e-cars is a good example. But what are you doing in that sphere to help, in effect, create public procurement as a stimulus to the economy locally? Fareed.
Yeah, so Oleg, tell me please, if I give the right answer, will you move your headquarters from Belarus to Ukraine? So, okay, I have to argue with you, I'm sorry. Yeah, from the one side, really an investor wants to understand his legitimate expectations. He wants to know what will be in 3, 5, and 10 years. Does he have to put money into Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, or any other country? So, but I do not think that the government, that the public sector should give money to startups. I launched my own startup in 2014, and I was not waiting for money from the side of the government, because the only thing, no, three things that the government can do for any type of startup, for any business, innovative one or not, is the first thing is to deregulate the process of the launch of the project. Yeah, if you understand that you have to go to 15 government institutions and receive different types of documents that for 80% duplicate each another, it means that you do not create a chance for a person to start it easily. The second thing is that the investment of the government into any kind of startup can be not it can be not direct investment. Indirect investment, it means that we can say that, okay, we will create certain conditions for tax optimization for startups. They will have to pay less, and that will be the investment of the public sector. Because if you do not take money from the startup, it means that you give them money. Yeah? So, for example, 20% tax in Ukraine. But the main problem is that the startups do not want the government to give some easy, some more interesting conditions, for example, in taxation, because they do not know whether they will earn money, whether they will have profit or revenue. So perhaps, someone mentions that 98% of startups, they do not go to the active phase. So they do not know, and they want the government to give them money. But actually, the government should create the needed legislative basis for the investors to be attracted into country. And one more thing, and that is the problem of the region, of all the countries of Eastern Partnership, of all the post-Soviet countries, is intellectual property rights. So that is the biggest problem of our region. Even in case we create all the needed conditions for the startup to develop their product here, they definitely will try to find some better ways of tax optimization, but nevertheless, the main reason why they are leaving the countries of Eastern Partnership is because they are not secured in their IPs. So they want to find out those jurisdictions where they will be totally protected. And that is the biggest problem why we cannot hold and we cannot leave all the innovative startups inside of our countries. That is the main problem of the region.
Thank you. Rashad.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Farid that, of course, from one side, the state must help make investment, but the state money mustn't be toxic for startups, especially for the ones who are trying to move abroad. That's why, at the moment, diversing our attitude to private sector, we are trying to make more, not regulation, there good conditions for new ecosystem players to rise up, for angel investors to grow up, for venture capital funds to appear, to make their absolutely transparent regulation for them. Once again, there are some competition between different state bodies in approach. One state body want for ecosystem to rise up, another one are thinking about taxes and other strict restrictions for investment commonly. 2 years ago, we had the analyzing made by UNDP experts, and due to their innovation development and comparing older post-Soviet Union countries, they came to their decision that there are very similar problems. And due to this report, we are now trying to make the new regulation for state procurement that will make some projects more effective for startups, for regional products to be used by their state bodies.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to take the final question with Juan, and I'm going to ask you thinking about what you've heard today from this very strong and original thinking group of local leaders and addressing an audience that's full of value creators. Everyone in this room is here today because they have a special interest and passion and skill for creating value. Tell us what the World Bank may see that's unique to this region, both the opportunity and the challenge.
Okay, very, very good. I just wanted to make another point that just hearing this conversation before I answer that question. One of the issues that needs to be addressed by governments is the broader enabling environment, the business environment. Whether it is IT or not IT is a secondary question. It's just creating the overall rule of law. And for that, we have the World Bank issues every year. It's a doing business report, which covers many of the areas that have been touched upon here. You know, the opening a business, creating a business. The regulations should be streamlined. There should be the single window, like the Singapore one-stop shop, where you don't need to fill in 20 different applications to 20 different ministries, organizations, agencies. Just everything in one place, like you know. Like you're doing online shopping and you get your approvals instantly, and then the inspections. There's a history of multiple inspections by different organizations and agencies, especially in this part of the world. That also needs to be streamlined and be made clear. The firms need to know from the beginning of the year what kind of inspections they're going to be receiving over the course of the year, and not be subject to maybe in one day to 3 different agencies coming to ask for similar documents and checking papers. The issue of paper-based records. If everything can be done online and can be done electronically, there's no need to have all these papers, right? So the transition to digital business environment is probably at the basis of this. In addition, not even talking about the specifics of the IT industry. Now, what differentiates this region? I think we have already heard it from many of the other speakers, which is the high human capital. I think that is one of the assets. In some cases, it may be eroding, so it needs to be more attention paid to the educational system, because you cannot live forever from the rents of the Soviet system. You need to keep updating the education system. As I mentioned earlier, collaboration between universities could be something that can be built upon. There's already some collaboration going, but the Eastern Partnership is a very diverse set of countries, so maybe there's a need for more of that. Through the collaboration with the European Union, there's a lot of effort being made in harmonizing policies and regulations. That would probably bring them a long way towards being at the same level. And in that sense, the issue of access to capital, venture financing, and so on, if there's a way in which one venture capital company that is registered in one country can already automatically operate in all countries, that would already open up more opportunities for all the IT entrepreneurs in the region. I think there's also an important element in this region that is a positive asset, I think, is the closeness to the European Union and the being in between the European Union and the Asian region. So capitalizing on the geographic location and the flow of data between Europe and Asia, it needs to go through this region, broadly speaking. So I think the physical location as well as the intellectual capital is something that the region can capitalize on. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. And I would summarize that by saying it's a good place to stop because of the pointing in the direction of capital is a mysterious thing, and the formation of capital locally is one of the goals of this forum, and that starts with harmonization of laws, policies, and regulations devoted to growing the entrepreneurial class generally, but also growing the IT industry specifically. And so that gives us, I think, some great raw material and good, very practical ideas to work with over the next year and develop and mature for purposes of the next State and IT Forum for Eurasia. So join me, won't you, in thanking this very creative, very passionate group of speakers. Thank you.